When's the last time you hugged him?
February 5th, 1999. I was granted a visit, which wasn't supposed to be a visit. It was supposed to be a phone call because I refused to take a plea on the case. And I took the plea on the case. Well, I wanted to see my father, and I wanted to be declared a civilian. I wanted to be put on a shelf for the rest of my life. And I sent him a message up earlier, and he evaluated that message. And when I walked into that visit, he came right at me. I gave him a hug first. Well, it's really interesting to tell you because you'll enjoy this story. Because again, it goes into the persona of John Gotti. Okay, not me. I wouldn't have done it this way, but he did. I'm there, and a marshal escorts me, okay, to visit my father now. And at first, the prosecution, Southern District in White Plains, they refused to have me and my father in the same room. Prosecutor gets up and says that we communicate in a code that the CIA would have a hard time cracking. They can't be in the same room. She's telling Barrington Parker, Judge Barrington Parker, this. And he says, nonsense. Under the same provisions that he's seen him in Marion, Illinois, he could see his father. Now, the problem was USP Springfield wasn't qualified to create those provisions, to create that booth, the glass, everything else. So they had to put us in a conference room. And we had to sit across the table, a wide table, and it was a tripod set up, it videotaped the whole thing. Okay, the whole thing. And I get there, and the marshal walks me in and excuses himself, and the lieutenant and captain of the prison come in and greet me, and I shake their hand. How are you? Your father's being brought down right now, and he's dying of cancer. This is February 5th, 1999, as I'd said. He had the surgeries, his jaw's missing, half his tongue is missing, half his pec is gone. He's down to maybe 160 pounds, 165 pounds. He comes down, he's belly chained and all shackled, and I hear the chains moving in the hall. He's coming down. He's doing the stutter step dance because the only way we can walk with the ankle chains on. And there's about 8 or 9 guards around him. They're bringing him, they're transporting him. But right before he comes into the room, 2 FBI agents dip into the room. And I'm looking at them, and they're dressed in suits, comes over and they identify themselves. They're from the Springfield, Mass office, and they hold their hand out. I shake their hands. And he says, Mr. Gotti, we're going to be sitting in on the visit between you and your father. And I says, I don't think so. And they says, I said, look, I don't have a problem with you sitting in and listening. My father won't sit in the room with you people. I'm just telling you ahead of time. I'm a gentleman in this respect, but he's not going to be in this respect. I'm just telling you right now. He says, well, we're going to have to. And all of a sudden, like on cue, now I hear the chains coming, and he comes in. And he sees me, and he smiles. He's all shackled up, and I'm heartbroken. I'm crushed. I see him now. It's the first time I saw him. If his face is missing, and I'm crushed. And I'm looking at him. I'm just staring at him, and he's belly chained, and taking the chains off his feet. And he looks over, and he goes, he gives me a smile, and he goes, who are these 2 gentlemen? And the fellow walks over, how are you doing? I'm special agent, such and such. My father says, no, pull your hand back. He said, what do you want? He says, we're going to sit in. Take me out of here. Take me out of here. He's backing out. He says, John, it's great seeing you. These men can never sit in the room with me. And he backs out. And then the captain jumps up and says, no. We have an order. We have a court order. Courts, federal judge Barrington Parker. Nowhere in this order does it say you're to be in this room. You have to leave. This visit has to proceed. It's a 90-minute visit. It's allowed, authorized by a federal judge. You have to leave. And they left. And he wouldn't even sit in the room. He wouldn't even sit in the room with these individuals. He wouldn't sit in the room. And at that visit, that's when I had the opportunity to hug him. So at that moment, they left the room. They unchained my father. A lieutenant stood in the room with the tripod for the camera because he had to operate the camera. And I was allowed to walk around the table, and I was allowed to give him 1 hug, which I didn't want to let go. And then I went to my side of the table, and I had to sit, and we had our visit. We had our 90-minute visit, which was memorialized by that tape, which the government refused to acknowledge that it even existed until I was about to be granted a hearing. And then they started turning over evidence that I knew they had, stuff that they had. What made that visit so important was the fact that he opens the conversation, some niceties, and I'm telling him, he's talking about a surgery, and then you look great, John, and I'm saying, Dad, but why this, why that? And you could see I'm a bit emotional. And then he goes on to tell me about how he feels a man should comport himself and so on. Then he goes and says, well, Joseph says John wants closure. Now, Joseph was an attorney who came to see my father and basically gave my father my message. Now, if I tell you I want closure, Pat, what would you take that to mean? Would you take it to mean that I want closure, I want to move on with my life, I want to do something different with my life?
Different with your life.
What you thought I was, what you thought it was, that reality is no more a reality. So I wanted to move on. And it was my way of telling my father, if I win my case, I'm going home, I want to be a civilian. If I lose my case, I'll do my 20 some odd years and I'm going home to be a civilian. That's it. You're my cause. You're my cause. Maybe that was your cause, but you are my cause, okay? You're dying. I hope and pray you live. I hope you pray and live you 20, 30 more years. And if that's the case, you know what? I would have been in that world still today. I'd be in that life today.
You told him this? Or you're thinking this?
I'm thinking, and the message that was brought to him was of such.
How did you give it to him, though?
It was sent. It was sent to him.
So before he's had that 90-minute visit with you, that the federal... So before he knew you're coming in to have that conversation with him.
He knew I was having that conversation.
Was he disappointed?
A bit. But he opens the conversation by saying, Joseph said John wants closure. And he said, that word is not in my son's vocabulary. He goes on to talk about it. And then he's telling me, and then we're having our conversation, and we communicate in the way we know how to communicate, my father and I. We can feed off each other, okay? And, you know, at that point, he's letting me know his feelings. And I'm sort of letting him know my feelings. I tell him about my son, John Gotti. And I'm telling him about his other grandson, John Gotti. And I'm saying, what's your hope and expectations for them? This is me now. And I'm expendable. But are they expendable? Are your grandkids expendable? So when do we stop this? At what point do you think, you're my cause? If you're going to be here forever, then I'm here with you. I'm with you. I said I'd follow you off a cliff, and I'm going to die with you. Okay? But if you're dying, I see it.
You're telling him this.
He understands where I'm going with this, and my body language is telling him, and he's like, you know, he's opening up his jumpsuit and he's going like this, and I'm looking. And I remember when they said it first gave him 120 days to live. He had stage 4 of squamous head and neck cancer, very aggressively moving, and they gave him 120 days to live. He ultimately lived almost 4 years. But we knew what they were going to do. We knew how the cancer materialized. We knew how it matured. We know how it got there. The government did it. They did it. He had infections in his mouth from his implants. They took away his commissary where he was able to drink bottled water. They took it away from him. And they made him drink and brush his teeth in water from Marion, Illinois, which you can pull up. There's Amnesty International had done a report on Crab Orchard Lake. The prison was built on this Crab Orchard Lake, on its old abandoned coal mines. The waters are highly carcinogenic, and they should tell us when we come in, drink from the filtered fountains, and the inmates was recommended to drink bottled water. Well, because John owed a fine of $250,000 and refused to pay not one nickel to them, not even $25 a month would he give them, okay? They took his commissary. So he could no longer use the bottled water, so now he's forced with loose implants, because remember, you develop gum disease from lack of vitamin D. You're in solitary confinement at that point, 6 years. 6 years in solitary confinement, no sun. No sun. So his implants became weakened. He had gum disease, infections, open wounds. Now you're making him drink that water from the sink in his cell, highly carcinogenic, okay, within a year. One bump appears, then the second bump appears, then the third bump appears. Now, the physician's assistant, they don't even have doctors see you. A doctor doesn't even see you. They send the physician's assistant to see you in Marion, and you got to check you through the bars. You can't leave your cell, they're checking you through the bars. Physician's assistant's name was Zuko. He's out of Indiana. I have his reports. He issued his reports that these are suspicious. They ignored it. A month goes by. He issues another report. New tumor growing, very suspicious. They ignore it. Finally, he makes a formal complaint. He was a really good guy, a solid guy, this physician's assistant in Marion, Zuko. And they fired him. He said, something's wrong with this guy. He doesn't have a throat infection. He's got tumors growing all over his neck, all growing out of his neck. They told him, you know what? You're taking too much of a personal interest with John Gotti, and they fired him. And ultimately, in the end, we got an attorney to force them to bring him out. And then that's when they diagnosed him stage 4 head and neck aggressive squamous cell cancer. And they said it was too late. He had 120 days to live. They did a radical surgery, 36 radiations, which is the maximum allotted, took part of his jaw, took part of his tongue, everything out. And basically, this is the beauty part. After doing all of that, I had that visit with my father, and a short time later, they took him right back to Marion, Illinois, and dumped him right back in solitary confinement to die.
Why?
Because he's John Gotti, and they could.
For no reason.
No reason. Listen, my father never committed you go to Marion, Illinois for one reason and one reason only. You commit an infraction in the Bureau of Prisons, meaning. There's a step program here. The lowest, there's camps in the federal system, then there's 1s, 2s, 3s. I was in most of my bid in disciplinary 4s. 5 is a penitentiary, okay? And then after penitentiary, that's the maximum security in America. There's only one level 6 in the country. That was Marion at that time, okay? John was a court committal, straight from the courts, right to Marion, Illinois, right to a level 6, without committing one single infraction, only because of his popularity with other inmates. They felt he'd be a threat to security, okay? And I guess, try to break him. They brought him to Marion, locked him in solitary confinement for years, left him like that, just like that, okay? So that in itself should tell you, that this is a direct court committal. You only go to Marion, Illinois if you stab somebody when you're in a penitentiary, take hostages, you escape. There's levels. You have to graduate to those levels. So a 4, if I was to hurt somebody in the 4, I'm going to the penitentiary to 5. If the 5 is the maximum, that's the end of the road. How do we discipline you now? If you're in a 5, they have their own solitary confinement, because I did time. I was in Lewisburg in the hole there and in Atlanta. But that's the buck stops there. Next thing is this. Oh, that's not going to faze you? Well, now we're taking you to Marion now. That keeps you in check. Okay, that's where all the hardest of the hardcore end up in Marion, Illinois. All the shot callers for all the major organizations, or the jailhouse prison gangs, or whatever, that's where they end up. Marion, Illinois is the end of the road. That's where it is, the most violent of the violent, okay? Or the escape risks.
You're going to think I'm crazy when I tell you this, but the last 13 and a half years, I've been working on my first fiction book to write, ever. Fiction book to write. And while I finished this book, a year ago, I got the strangest phone call about one of the characters in the book where the guy wanted to meet with me, and he read the book. And afterwards, is like, wait a minute, am I the villain in the book? This is a story about a character named Asher, who is half Armenian, half Assyrian, whose father was involved in the Iranian Revolution, linked to Savak, working with the Shah, that they escape, and he gets recruited to a secret society. Well, when you go to the secret society, it's been around for a couple thousand years. They've developed some of the craziest leaders of all time, and they test you. There's unique tests that they have at this society where they test to see your emotional mental toughness. One of the tests that they have is very rigorous. It's purely mental. Of course, there's a physical one, but one is mental and emotional. If you're Armenian, if you're Syrian, if you're Persian, this is a book you're going to be reading and saying, holy moly, this is the kind of stuff you talk about in here? Yes. If you're somebody that's fascinated by history, this is a book for you. Characters. There's a technology that this society, secret society, builds where you go into a vault. I won't spoil it for you. When you go down, they have a technology where you get to sit down and watch and have a 3-4 hour conversation with Tupac. You can set up a debate between Karl Marx and Ayn Rand. Karl Marx is in the book, who wrote Communist Manifesto. Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged, is in the book. Marilyn Monroe explains the concept of seduction and sex in the book. When you read the book, it's about development of the next leaders in the world and how they do it and how they've been doing it for many years. And it's also about how to prevent the end of civilization and how this organization goes about doing it. So, I've never written a parenting book before, but if I ever wrote a parenting book, this is the closest thing to it because it's all mindset, a lot of crazy stories. Again, 13 and a half years. Trust me, I told myself I will not publish this book until I sell my insurance company and I'm fully disconnected from it, where it's no longer my responsibility 100%. When you read this, if you're a creative person, if you like fiction books, if you enjoyed Atlas Shrugged, or if you enjoy Divergent, if you like books like that, I think you're gonna enjoy reading this book. It's the creative side. Business books is very easy. Here's how you do it. Here's how this how it works. This is very creative. If you haven't placed the order yet, now you can order it on Simon & Schuster, Amazon. I'm gonna put the link up below somewhere here, maybe even in my profile. Go order the book and read it. I've never written a book where I can't wait to read your reviews to see what you think about this book. So I'm going on this wild journey, and we have some plans with this book here. If you support the things that I work on, I would appreciate you going and reading the book, order the book on Amazon, and then post a review. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.